new limited series, Under the Bridge, tells the story of the little-known rock band, the Chili Peppers, and how they suddenly became red hot. Sounds like a winner, right? Let's dive in. In 1997, 14-year-old Reena Virk joined up with friends at a party and never returned home. This true story is told through the eyes of up-and-coming author Rebecca Godfrey and a local police officer as they venture into the hidden world of some troubled young girls. Alright, so despite what I said in the intro, Under the Bridge is an 8-episode limited series that stars Riley Keough and Lily Gladstone. Now, Keough is real-life author Godfrey, who returns to her childhood home to write a novel and ends up getting involved with Reena Virk's case. Gladstone is the local police officer who also has history with Godfrey, and she is the real driver from the law enforcement side to even investigate the absence of Virk. Now, for me, this had a lot of the same feels as the American remake of The Killing, with Mariel Innes and Joel Kinnaman. It's not necessarily about case similarities or differences, but more in the tone of the storytelling. This is slow and angsty, which fits because the story centers around a bunch of teenagers who are stretching their boundaries and trying to establish their own independence. Now, this is going to be a weekly release, and while that is fine because the episodes are long enough to warrant weekly viewing, there are some storytelling decisions that I'm not sure are going to work for that week-to-week watching. I mean, obviously, there is a mystery as to why Reena is missing. And there is a huge revelation that comes in episode 3, maybe it was 4, which means we still have half the series to go through as the drama continues. Now, I would have much preferred to have this mystery obscured for longer, detailing out all of the relationships and the investigation. Instead, we get a lot of that after the reveal, and it feels a little bit anticlimactic within that order. Now, I have the luxury of binging it all at once, thanks to my screeners, but if I were watching this week to week, I'm not sure how long I'd hang on, since a lot of that intrigue, it just disappears. I mean, the performances from both Keough and Gladstone are reserved and they're mostly quiet. And they're not one-note characters, and they do have some dynamics, but they fit right with the tone of the majority of the show. Subdued, pondering. I mean, some of the color and vibrancy that creates excitement and fervor, that comes from the younger stars. They eat up the rebellious parts, and they play the cast-off kids in a way that feels real. Now, the handful that we closely follow, they're rough around the edges, and putting on facades just in order to create and then maintain personas that exhibit what they perceive to be strength. Well-adjusted adults are able to see these as more a pleas for attention and care, and because again, even though the handful that we follow are perceived as troublemakers or lost causes, they're still just hurt and abandoned young people attempting to survive and then make sense of the world that has chewed them up and spit them out. Now, these attitudes and behaviors, they also make it difficult to want to cheer on some of the characters. Even Reena, she's doing her very best to buck all of her upbringing to try and fit in with the crowd that she considers friends. And she can be abrasive and mean, which then makes it hard to sympathize with her. But she's still a character that we don't want to see come to harm. And same with most of the other kids. They may be annoying or even cruel, but they deserve a chance. All except one. There's one actor who crafts such a cold and calculated character that it made my hair stand on end. And then also made me yell at the TV. The portrayal is pure evil wrapped in a cutesy package. And it is absolutely infuriating as a viewer to be able to see how terrible this person is, but everybody in the show is either enamored with or hoodwinked by their facade. It's engaging from a viewing standpoint, but also maddening as a human. And there's a circularity to a portion of the storytelling, where past actions have a direct influence on present mindsets. There's way more the show could have delved into, especially when it comes to Gladstone's character, but we do get at least enough to have an understanding of who she is and what drives her. And the same goes for Keough's character. There's so much in her past that informs her present. And while again, we're given enough to understand her, there is way more story to tell that involves her family relationships and how they shape not only her current mindset, but also her entire worldview. It felt like the story was only scraping the surface to give us just enough to justify some of her behaviors so that they didn't seem implausible. But because of the thinness of a lot of the relational background, the character isn't nearly as moving or impactful as she could be. Now, most of the show is told through a mixture of flashbacks and the investigation that's going on in the present. And I like the flashbacks because they filled in all of the blanks and they kind of moved the story along. They also, though, became repetitive when we saw very similar actions and interactions just multiple times throughout each of the episodes. And when this happened, the story was working against the narrative to draw things out much longer than they needed to be, which in turn then lessened any intrigue or even urgency within the plot. So overall, Under the Bridge tells a sad story of wasted youth and terrible decisions, showcasing turbulent personalities and angsty interactions. The storytelling is patient and subdued, but shows its cards too early, leaving the rest of the series to try and maintain an air of interest and suspense. The acting is sufficient to convey the proper personalities, but many backgrounds are thinly developed, leading to reduced engagement. The repetitious story beats and information also reduce the effectiveness of the narrative, leaving audiences with a conclusive story, but not one that will be remembered for long. There's no sex or nudity, a lot of profanity, and some moments of brutal violence. I give Under the Bridge 2.5 out of 5 couches. And this isn't a bad watch, I just wanted more. So, are there any true crime stories that have been made into captivating shows or movies? Let me know what you've seen in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.